Welcome viewers. This is Janiser Ahmed bringing you your very own talk show, News and Views. And today we would be talking about the role of the press during the presidential campaign and how the press did its coverage of a very significant event in the US electoral history. Viewers, we would go back to early days of the press and the press coverage. I would relate one incident back in the days of President Harry Truman. When the election campaign was going on and President Harry Truman was running for re-election against New York Governor Thomas Dewey in 1948, the press, a section of the press, particularly Chicago Daily Tribune, they were not very happy with Harry Truman, and the editors, they did not support President Truman. At that time, the polls did not favor President Truman, and they said that they predicted that Thomas Dewey was going to win the elections. So before the one day before the election results were going to be announced, the staff in the newsroom, they were on strike, and so because the editors, they were naturally biased towards Harry Truman, they saw the polls, and the polls said that Thomas Dewey was going to win the election. So they told the staff to give the news that Thomas Dewey was going to win the election. So they published the news, and the headline was Dewey defeats Truman. The news went into the print, and the newspapers started to roll out. And at around 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, around 150,000 copies of Chicago Daily Tribune, they were published. And they were not only published, they went into circulation. People, they were going to people's doorsteps, and people were starting to read. But at a couple of hours later, it transpired that eventually it was Truman who was going to win the election. So the editors, they were embarrassed at their mistake, and they rushed to cover their, the error, and they tried to get back all the copies, and all the printing press and the circulation was stopped. This was a terrible embarrassment and mistake for the editors of the Tribune at that time. But Harry Truman, 2 days later, somebody handed him a copy of that paper, Chicago Daily Tribune, and President Truman was able to read out the headline, and he just laughed out loud. So that was his good humor with which he dealt with the press and that news. But it shows that the press can be wrong, and the opinion polls, you have to be very cautious about believing what opinion poll is saying. It is, and how many, and the number of people that it is based upon, what areas, what states, and the education and the background of the people that it is interviewing. That all has to be encompassed, and you have to be very careful about believing an opinion poll before you jump to a conclusion, just like the editors of the Daily Tribune did. So viewers, also there was in 1929, the newspaper editors, they were very optimistic about what was going to happen, and they were unable to predict the stock market crash of 1929. They were doing rosy stories on the economic and financial situation, but eventually it came out that the stock market, it virtually crashed, and the media failed to predict that kind of scenario. So in this day and age, as of now, the role of the press, that has been called into question. Some people are asking, did the press demonize President-elect Donald J. Trump, or was it biased towards its coverage? Because there are a number of questions that are being asked as to why the press was unable to do its job, or why the press relied so much on opinion polls, that it shifted its focus on only one aspect of President and his personality. Perhaps they did not like his demeanor. Perhaps they did not like the way he was making the statements. Perhaps they were unable to reflect on the anger of the American public that led towards the success of President Trump, President-elect Donald Trump. So all these failures, the press has to account for all these issues before it can jump to a conclusion. Viewers, at the New York Times, it was at the top of the campaign against President-elect Donald Trump. It was doing a number of stories. You cannot say that they were against. They were like targeting Mr. Trump, but like they shifted their focus. They shifted the entire focus of its reporting team onto President-elect Donald Trump, as if all of their newsroom and all of their reporting, they came down to one issue, and that was how to get some story on President-elect Donald Trump and to perhaps demonize him. There were a couple of stories, like one story was on his tax returns, that he had been unable to, he had been hiding the tax returns, and perhaps he was able to evade the authorities on that count. Then there was another story alleging, there were two women who were alleging that President-elect Donald Trump had touched them inappropriately. And likewise, there was another story by Washington Post about a portrait of Mr. Trump that he had bought from his money from his charity. So the list goes on and on and on. But not only did the reporters, they shifted their focus onto the personality of President-elect Donald Trump, but also the role of the opinion makers, the op-ed writers, the columnists, and that comes into question. There's a whole list of columnists who started writing opinion articles and venting out against Donald Trump. And the reason, perhaps, President Donald Trump, he did make himself controversial by making certain statements, like his statement regarding immigration, and temporarily he was not liked even in Great Britain when he said that he was going to ban all the Muslims from coming into the United States. But viewers, President-elect Donald Trump, he was able to rise because he made it very clear from the very start that he was going to be an unconventional presidential candidate. He was not going to be politically correct, and perhaps he was not even going to rely on. He said that he was against what he called as the Washington establishment, because and he referred to the corruption of the establishment, and he wanted to do something for the country. So and most importantly, he said that he was not going to take the donors' money, and he was going to finance his campaign out of his own pocket. So naturally, his style, you can call it, he was charismatic, or some would say that was ridiculous. Some did not like it. The reporters, perhaps they did not like it. But that was a phenomena that the press could not properly judge, and people started to make their own judgments, and that was where the problem came, when it failed to predict the whole phenomena of the rise that was, I would say, the rise of the American frustration. People were not happy. People were losing their jobs. The factories were being closed down, and naturally, Obama administration had done a lot for the country. It took them out of the economic crisis. But at the end of the day, there was a concern that jobs were being lost. The economy was not as it should have been, and there was also a frustration growing within the U.S. That the terrorists were still able to to conduct strikes within the U.S. They had been terrible attacks, Orlando attacks, and other attacks in which the terrorists they swore their allegiance to the ISIS. So that anger, President-elect Donald Trump, he was able to tap on that and also be able to make an assessment of that anger and find out and give a plan to the people as to how he was going to address those concerns. So perhaps press made a mistake or it was right. At the end of the day, it remains to be seen, but it has given rise to a lot of questions. And viewers, there was most remarkably after New York Times coverage of the election campaign. On the one hand, there was this concern that the press was not doing enough on the Clinton campaign. There was several emails of the entire email scandal, so to speak, of Hillary Clinton. It had raised up and kicked up a lot of political storm, and some people were saying that the press did not went after finding out what were the reasons of behind the entire email fiasco, as they call, and they did not do their homework. They gave Hillary Clinton the benefit of the doubt, and they went soft on her. That was their concern. And on the other hand, the press was targeting President-elect Donald Trump as if they had a beef to settle with him. Of course, there was an event, there was a press conference during which President-elect Donald Trump, he was unhappy with the New York Times, and he perhaps brushed aside, threw away the copy, the NYT copy, and saying that this is press and this is what they are doing. And so a lot of people, the NYT people, they were not happy with how President-elect Donald Trump was treating their paper and its reputation. So the entire campaign started, and at one time it seemed as if the NYT it was very unhappy with his campaign, and they sort of dubbed him as he was unfit to lead America. They were constantly saying that in their editorials, in their opinion pieces, and the reporting that had also become very it had become targeted on his personality, and that is not the job, of course, that the press should be doing. On the other hand, the Hillary Clinton's campaign, it was thought of, Clinton was thought of as the sane candidate, as the survivor, as as somebody who could take the U.S. out of its troubles, and she could save the day for the people. And there were reporters doing reporting saying that her campaign was very much organized compared to Trump's campaign, which they alleged was disorganized, confused, and what one paper said was discombobulated. All of that played into the negative criticism, and definitely it hurt President-elect Donald Trump's campaign. But at the end of the day, we saw that he was able to prove all of them, the reporters, wrong, and he was able to win the elections and surprise everybody. So definitely the press needs to perhaps check itself. And viewers, now we move on to the next segment, and the entire press coverage, it has raised the question of what are libel laws and how President-elect Donald Trump he would treat the press, and how he would have his relationship with the press. Questions are being raised, and naturally a segment of the media, it is very worried because they think that the office of the president, being the most powerful office, it can do some damage to the press, and that is what their concern is. Libel is, it comes from defamation. Defamation means injury to reputation. If you damage somebody's reputation, that falls under the libel category. If it is written, if it is spoken, if it is on television, that is slander. So President-elect Donald Trump has said that he is going to have a review of the libel laws, and specifically with the press in mind. He is going to revolutionize the entire relationship with the media, and as a result of that, the NYT publisher and the editor, they had to issue a letter to its readers saying that from now onwards, the press, the New York Times, it would review its reporting, and it would be focused towards reporting what it said was more honestly. It would focus its reporting to be more honest. Definitely, this letter came out after one of its public editors. She made a public statement saying that the Times had been unfair to Donald Trump in its election coverage, and it focused all of its energies and reporting and reporters and the entire newsroom staff towards demonizing Donald Trump. And the publisher and the editor they had to rush, and they had to issue this letter of apology to the public. But it does raises certain questions as to why this happened. Why is it true that the press had a beef to settle with the president-elect because they did not like it? If you do not like somebody, you cannot demonize them. At the end of the day, if libel laws are amended or changed, as President-elect Donald Trump has said, what consequences will it have for the freedom of press in the U.S.? That, to my mind, is a very, very important question. First Amendment gives absolute freedom, complete freedom to the press when it comes to reporting, and it gives them the power to do reporting. And it also goes back to the New York Times versus the Sullivan case, in which the judgment came that the First Amendment limits the ability of the states to impose damages on a publication resulting from the publication of that statement, even if it appears to be false in certain circumstances. So the First Amendment is what it is saying is that it limits the ability of the state to go after you and victimize you if it believes that some damage has been done to it by the publication of a statement. But even if that publication turns out to be false, but this is what the New York Times versus the Sullivan judgment is saying. That has shaped the entire discourse, and it has given a tremendous freedom and confidence to journalists and reporters over the years, and it has protected journalism and journalists from the state or any other big corporations, because it gives them their constitutional right to do their reporting, and with a degree of responsibility. But they also have to be responsible and should not, at the end of the day, abuse this tremendous power that has been given to them. Viewers, there's also this statement by James Madison, who said that the freedom of the press, it has to be preserved and protected. Freedom of the press in the U.S., it goes back to John Peter Zenger's, in the early days when the British government, they were not happy with his reporting, and they imposed a ban on him, on his reporting. But eventually he filed a lawsuit, and eventually he won the lawsuit. And from that day onwards, the freedom of the press, that has been guaranteed, and the reporters, they have the confidence that they can do their job without the fear of persecution by any powerful entity. But in this day and age, viewers, where the press and its role, it has widened to a very large extent, and definitely it needs to check itself because of this tremendous power and responsibility that it wields. It cannot just go wayward or haywire and turn its likes and dislikes into and a medium of hatred. That's what the press should not do. Welcome back, viewers. We are now into our second segment. Here we would be talking about what constitutes invasion of privacy. What does freedom of information basically means? And what are the libel laws all about? Invasion of privacy, the press has to be very careful about that. If you are going to somebody's door and they are relaxing on a chair and sipping soda, you cannot just go and take pictures. That would be considered invasion of privacy. Similarly, if you are going after somebody and doing a tremendous harm to their reputation, that would be considered an invasion of privacy, and that would not fall within the the basic definition with which the press has to act. Their state libel laws, they differ from state to state. In one state, for instance, in the US, if you call somebody a hard-boiled egg, that might not be considered as libel, because even though the plaintiff might not be happy with that use of that term, but at the end of the day, that the use of that term, it has not harmed their reputation in a way that their ability to earn money or their financial status in some way, that has been harmed. But at the end of the day, if there has been significant harm to your reputation, that definitely means that there is a chance when you can go and file a libel suit against the reporter who did it. In this case, President-elect Donald Trump, he has said on some occasions that he is going to go after the press, and he would use the libel laws, and he would but yeah, and if he goes against certain columnists and opinion writers, you can come across a lot of material that is accusatory and where the language is inappropriate, where the columnists they have not been able to criticize President-elect Donald Trump in a very gentlemanly way. The use of the language that again is questionable. The terms that they used in criticizing Mr. Trump, that again is unworthy of an, if you happen to be a national columnist and opinion writer. So there is a lot of room for this tussle to go on. President-elect Donald Trump, if he wins the office and if he starts to transform and review the libel laws, definitely there is room, because he has his concerns, and there is evidence that the media, part of the media, that did not act responsibly. So how will that tussle play out? At the end of the day, it should not leave a negative impact on the freedom of the press, because viewers, in this day and age where big corporations are working and there are big skyscrapers, and you cannot step inside any building, and and it is extremely hard for the reporters to get access to information, and they are being left out. So because of that scenario, there is deep need to protect, to let the reporters do their job freely without any pressure or any fear of persecution. But also the reporters, they must not abuse their power. Viewers, also I must tell you that President-elect Donald Trump, because of his unconventional style of making debates and talking to the public, and his whole electoral campaign, he has been talking what he says is his own style of speaking, and that was not liked by the press. Uh, he has taken on towards the use of Twitter. He is using Twitter almost virtually every day, and whenever he feels that he has to make a statement, he tweets instead of talking to a group of reporters or holding a press conference. And his style on Twitter, or rather his use of Twitter, that has been so frequent that it is not frequent. In fact, it has been completely revolutionized his relationship with the press, because the reporters, they are not happy when somebody who they think should be talking to them face to face is making a tweet on any social media site. So they are naturally, they are concerned, and they are, even some of them are very angry, because they think that, how would they be getting their paychecks if the president is just tweeting, and that's all that he is doing, and no attention is being given to them, and they are not being called to the White House. Most importantly, there is this thing called pool reporters. What they do is that they are always with the president, and they travel with him in his in a Air Force One, and they are there to do the presidential coverage. That is their beat. This is what they do. President-elect Donald Trump has said that he perhaps he does not like the idea of pool reporters, that he would use Twitter instead of talking to reporters, and he does not like reporters to be on his side when he's traveling, and because there is no need to hold press conferences. And ever since the election, there was a significant time during which he did not talk to reporters, or did not hold any press conference. How would that play out in the days to come? This has unnerved the reporters, because naturally they are not used to being treated that way. In this country, there are several judgments that say that the press has to be given access to information, and especially access to governmental information, if democracy is to succeed. For a democracy to grow and to develop and to succeed, the press has its right to have governmental access. The reporters think that liberty is going to come to an end. That perhaps is not a view shared by the Trump administration, because all he is saying is that I am using this social media platform to talk to my voters, to talk to the public, and there's nothing wrong with that. Perhaps viewers, the press, the reporters, they are also not happy with the fact that just like in the early 19th century, the telegraph came and it completely transformed how the press was working. The reports over different areas around the world, they started going. People were able to get them from one corner of the world to the other corner of the world in a matter of a few minutes. And so the traditional way with which the press acted, that completely was changed. In this age, it is the age of the internet, it is the age of social media. Not even social media, things have gone on to new heights, and there virtually every day you can see a new way with which people are sharing information, and it is extremely hard to keep up with all of those innovative ways, and the press definitely needs to check itself. The days of when you would have the paper copy in your hand, they are perhaps they are not over, but a transformation is in process. People are using their iPads, people are using their cell phones and different other methods of communication to have access to information. And naturally, where it has not suppressed or reduced the role of the reporter, it definitely has revolutionized or it is in the days to come, it is going to transform the press and media. And that is where the reporters and the editors, they need to adjust themselves. They need to be at home with this transformative phase, if they are able to, if they want to succeed. There was one concern some people were saying, and there was data to base that opinion, was that New York Times subscribers, uh, they stopped their subscriptions, and that was thought of as a blow to the NYT, because the readers, they were not happy, number one, with the kind of coverage that the NYT did, the election coverage. They thought that, they made virtually nothing out of President-elect Donald Trump's prospects for winning. They said that they virtually passed a judgment almost every day that he was going to lose, that his organization, that his election campaign, it was disorganized, and he had made personal many enemies, and the people did not like him, and it was just like a hot potato kind of thing. And on the other hand, Hillary Clinton, she was going to win, and there were opinion polls. There was one opinion poll, viewers, that said that there was like 84% chances of Hillary Clinton winning the election, and that was published in NYT. And so you can imagine the kind of biased reporting that was displayed, and it was because of that very reason that the readers, they unsubscribed from the New York Times. And the same happened with the other newspapers, Washington Times. But there at the, of course, there is another view. A new report has come up. It is saying that the subscriptions that has gone up. Now, I do not know which story to believe, that the subscribers have gone down or the subscriptions, they have come up. There are two different opinions, of course. But that shows the discontentment within the readers, that they are telling to the reporters, they are telling to their editors that you cannot take your liberty for granted. You have to do your homework. You have to know that you cannot tell us that because of this particular poll is saying that this particular person is going to win the election. You cannot pass a judgment on that. You have to take it at face value. So that unhappiness of the readers, they naturally, it has dealt a blow to the readership, and it also shows that definitely, again, that the media, it needs to check itself. With the President-elect Donald Trump coming to power, he will take office on January the 20th. The press would be in anticipation, and right now it is many editors would be thinking as to how they would be treated, but that is not the case. Donald Trump, he has shown good humor, he has shown his courage and the ability that he has the good humor to take criticism, even if that happens to be negative, because after he was elected, he reached out to the publishers and the editor of the New York Times, and he went over to the NYT office in the Times Square and held a meeting with the reporters, the op-ed writers, and the publisher. And he tried to convey his concern, but also, took whatever they had to say. But that hopefully went well, and that was seen as a goodwill gesture by the president. Definitely, there was no animosity because that meeting with the publisher and the editor, that should have ended any hostility that should have prevailed. And so that has paved the way for a very good relationship, apparently, after the Trump administration takes office. Viewers, let me go back to the days of President George Bush. He had this, a group of pool reporters by his side all the time. They were with him, and they were doing their job, which is that they were covering their beat, the presidential beat. It is one of the most important beats, and every reporter naturally has this dream of doing the presidential beat. So, viewers, the thing is that if the president starts to tweet and does away with the pool reporters, saying that I don't need to hold press conferences, I don't need to talk to the reporters, all I can do is to do a tweet, and whatever I have to say in 140 characters, I would just tweet, and the whole world will know Definitely, being the President of the United States, most prestigious office, people would pay heed to your tweet. But it, to certain analysts, it raises the question of how the reporter's right to be a witness to history. Some people say that for a democracy to succeed, the journalists, they need to have the access, and they need to witness the history in making. Because if you are watching what is happening right now at first hand, that is what true journalism is. And journalism is interlinked with democracy, because both help each other, and that is how people's rights are protected. It prevents you from somebody that can. But of course, we have to go back to President Bush's term, when he would have this team of reporters with him. When the 9/11 took place, and he was at a school making a speech, the reporters by his side, they were able to witness the history. They were able to see at first hand whatever was happening, what the President Bush's reaction was, and they were able to tell to the whole public and their readers the American response to that tremendous calamity. So they witnessed the history themselves at first hand, and in a way, they were watchdogs of history. So you cannot shut your door onto anybody who's there to do their job. And this is what the editors and other analysts are saying, that perhaps it would be Mr. Donald Trump, he would not be doing a favor to the freedom of press if he adopts this method of tweeting and neglecting the reporters and avoiding the press conference. For a democracy to succeed, the reporters, they have a right to do their coverage freely, but also they have the responsibility that they should not turn their anger or their likes and dislikes into facts. They need to double check, and they need to know that reporting has no relationship with opinion making. Opinion making is completely different. You can call anybody names, you can do whatever you want to write against somebody, but that you have to do in an opinion piece on the op-ed pages. When you are reporting, it has to be exactly like neither one more or one word less. It has to be exactly from the source it is coming from. With that, viewers, we hope that the next administration will have a very smooth and very positive relationship with the press, and it would do tremendous good to the American democracy, and we would see a smooth relationship. Thank you very much for watching, viewers, my show, News and Views. This is Janiser Ahmed from Millennium TV USA. Until the next show, goodbye.